I like how I immediately hit record. I'm like, nope, that's going in the show. All right, go right into it. What were you just saying?
Well, so I this was really kind of like one of those deals. It was a really weird feeling for me, and I'll explain what I mean. So I'm on Facebook, and I was thinking to myself about how it would behoove us as cartoonists to think about why we're doing what we do. In other words, to rethink formerly held conceptions and think about, I'm doing this thing that I've done for a while. Why am I doing it? And has the reasonings behind the why changed? Do I need to change my approach? The obvious example here is what I keep preaching time and time again on webcomics.com and on this show about social media. You should be posting your comic in social media, not a link to your comic in social media. We used to post a link to the comic because we wanted to drive traffic to the site for ad sales. But that why has changed. So the why now is you want people to be reading that comic on social media. That's where almost all of the content consumption comes from your readers. And you need to have that comic there for them to read. They're not going to follow a link. And so you got to think about the why before you can get there. I'm sitting here penciling my comic, and that why is jumping around in my head. And finally, I take a break, and I write a Facebook post. And it basically says, after writing 2 how-to books and co-writing a third, it occurs to me that I shouldn't be writing how-to books. I should be writing a why-to book.
Right.
And I really thought that was kind of an interesting thought. And it opened up such a bucket of despair, self-loathing, defeatist, sad sack, fucking shit. It was really amazing. The stuff that it opened up, because everybody was like, yeah, I don't know why I'm doing comics either. And I'm like, no. That's not.
No.
That's not what I mean.
No.
And I'm like, and on Facebook, nobody reads the previous comments before they write their comic. So I'm saying the same thing, person after person after person. I'm like, no. That's not what I mean. And somebody's coming in. Yeah, I keep thinking it's time for me to quit. And it's like,
geez.
No.
God.
If it gets, listen, I go, dude, listen. If it gets to that point where you're questioning why you're doing comics, then you need to take a break. You need to take a step back from this. Something's not right. You need a breather, and that's okay to admit that to yourself that you need a breather, by the way. But it just went on and on. The despair, the masochism. It's like, and finally, this gets to be like 13 comments down, and finally, it was the first time I almost deleted one of my own Facebook posts, because it's like, this must be what it feels like to have a stroke. I'm saying words, and you guys are hearing something completely different from what I'm saying.
Okay, so can I jump in, because I have a lot of thoughts about this that have popped up in the course of you talking about it.
It's been on my mind ever since.
So the first thing I want to talk about is how, and I love this about you, is that there are 2 stages of Brad Geiger. Stage one is, let's just call him Bad Axe Michigan Brad. Just doop ba dup dup. Life is great. La da da da. How are you? What a nice day I'm having. Hee hee hee. I'm cartooning. La 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 la. What a sunny day. And then the other point is when you push Brad just far enough, you're like, geez, fucking shut up. It's like someone has cut you off on the turnpike as you're trying to pull on.
And there's just a thin veneer between those two.
Oh my God, it's like the thinnest level of saran wrap between those two levels. And it's like, one level is like, I've just handed you an ice cream cone with sprinkles on it and the sun is shining and life is great. And then if someone just pushes you just far enough, it becomes, and I love it when someone pushes you over the edge to that. It just cracks me up.
My favorite character in animated cartoons was always Donald Duck, and it's because I understood that guy.
and you both have a propensity for not wearing pants, so the two things together. All right. So then my second thought on this is that have you ever had a question very misinterpreted in daily conversation, maybe with a stranger, where you're like, whoa, 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 not what I meant. Like, you know how there's that East Coastism of like, hey, how you doing? Hey, how's it hanging? How you doing? I mean, it's a very Americanism. But every once in a while, you'll get on an elevator and you'll be like, hey, how you doing? And the stranger's like, oh, I got to tell you. Oh, it's been and literally,
the doctor just said it's malignant.
Yeah, and in the parlance of daily Americana life, the "how you doing" is like "hi." You know, it's a head nod kind of a thing verbally.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, it elicits a response, and you're like, "Oh no! Now I have to stay on this elevator for the whole ride and hear this story because they are not going to let me off of this."
Yeah, I only wanted to go to the third floor. Looks like I'm all the way to 12 at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So then my third thought was it's funny to me that, and maybe it's revelatory, that asking a question like, hey, why are you posting on social media triggers the larger question of like, why am I doing anything? Why am I even walking around this earth? I don't know. Maybe we all, if given the chance as artists, if you ask the question in just the right way, we are a half a second away from tears at any given moment.
Yeah, or just catch them at the right moment in time, too. That we're all like that deep down. And I just might have been catching these people at the wrong time.
Like, I think if you had caught me on a quiet moment where I wasn't feeling good and you out of nowhere put your hand on my shoulder and said, hey, Dave, do you think like you're failing in your career? I'd be like, oh God, Brad, maybe I am.
As a matter of fact, I do.
I do think that, Brad. I do think I'm failing. So like we should give them some credit in the sense that we're all a half a second away from tears at any given moment in life. But I recognize and I appreciate that struggle of having asked a basic question about why you do what you do as a cartoonist and getting back like, I don't even know why life is worth living anymore.
Yeah, it's like it went existential in like under 60 seconds. You know, I was saying we should think about you. We should rethink. We should always be questioning. And it went right to existentialism in a heartbeat. And it was like, why am I even here? And it's like, no, come on. I just want you to think about maybe using a different pen.
When you go from marketing planning to existentialism in under a minute, that's a problem. That's it's like doing this when you're it's like going from like, hey honey, what should we order for dinner tonight to how's our marriage going? Like
yeah, exactly. I was thinking about Chinese. I'm thinking you should sleep on the couch.
Oh my God, I took a sip of coffee as you were saying that. That was almost a legitimate spit take. That's amazing. All right, well now at the 8-minute point, our longest ever. Let me welcome you, ladies and gents, to
Did you forget the name of the show?
I did.
If you say Surviving Creativity, I'm out of here.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Webcomics Weekly. No, okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm Dave Kellett, his buddy, and also the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week, I just realized on this fucking sheet you've got stripped misspelled as stipped. Do you got the same sheet as I do?
Oh my gosh, I do have it misspelled.
How? This is like the 15th show, and I'm just noticing that it totally threw me. I couldn't even do my thing. And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Brad. By the time this show airs, we will have moved house. So by the time I listen to this, I will be in a better mood. But right now, I want to fall off a cliff. That's what I want to do.
It was funny when you always do the same thing before we record. You turn off your fridge and everything, and I heard you open up that refrigerator door. I heard a lot of glass clinking. Is those beers for the movers?
It is a fridge full of beers, and I was I don't know if you've ever had this, but in past moves, one of the most miserable things to move without the right box is a bunch of beers, like a bunch of glass beers.
Yeah.
So I'm almost thinking, do I just leave it for the buyers as a gift? Like they're going to be moving into, and like, hey, here's a half a case of Corona.
No. Wait, you got movers or do you got family?
I got both. I got many hands make light work.
You need beers. You need beers in the fridge. If not for them, for you.
I need beers. I need beers, and also for my lower back, I'm going to need a major surgery. Probably is what I'm going to need.
Well, a nice cold beer held right at the small of your back is just as good as an ice pack. And if you're drinking Corona, it has about the same alcohol content.
I want to pull you in close and tell you as a friend that's not how beer works. You gotta
Oh, shucks.
we'll be talking about that on this week's pro tips for the Patreon backers. How to drink beer. All right, so
how beer works. That's going to be the title.
How beer works in relation to your cartooning career.
Oh gosh, why am I here?
Why am I here?
I'm glad to hear that you're finally rounding the corner and you'll be settled in the new digs soon.
Well, but here's the frustrating part about the stage of the move that I am at. There's like 80% of the move that once you get it done, you're like, great, I'm making great progress. And then the last 10 to 20%, and anybody who has ever moved a house of more than one person will recognize this. I was up in the attic and I was like, oh, there's just a couple of boxes up here. And then I round a corner. Nope. There's a Barbie dream house from 1978 and still it's an original box. And I'm like, why is this up here? Why do we still have this?
Oh my God.
What are we doing? And then I'm like, oh, I grabbed the Barbie Dream House. Behind it, the Barbie Dream Boat, equally gigantic box, also from 1978. And I'm like, but this is the stage of the move that I'm at. I went up into my shed attic, and there's a bunch of like old yard tools that are super rusty. I'm like, what? How do I have these? What did I do? First of all, why did I not throw them out? They're super rusty. Second of all, why did I put them way up at the top of the back of my shed? It's like you're like a fish in a fish tank. You grow to fill the space of your house.
Yeah. That's the truth.
And so like every nook and cranny of this house, I'll go under the floorboards and I'm like, oh, there's my original drawing desk underneath the house. I don't know how that got down there. Well, I guess I got to move that too. So anyway, I'm very frustrated.
Now listen, Dave, the shed tools, that's the stuff you leave for the new owners. You leave the old hoe and the old rake. That stuff you leave. The beers you take.
Oh, geez, what a nice gift that would be. Hey, congratulations on your new house. Here's a shitty hoe from 15 years ago. My friend Brad told me not to leave you a beer, but here's a shitty hoe.
Oh, God. I'm not touching that one. So...
Oh, God. I walked into that. Never mind.
I about 3 punchlines came to mind, none of which were appropriate for this show.
Oh, my God.
What'd you say, Dave?
What? No, I didn't say anything.
Oh, how's my Kickstarter doing? Oh, I'm glad you asked. We're about the time that this show airs, we will be right into our last week, and we've hit our goal. We're going for stretch goals now, so that's newevilbook.com, and thank you for bringing that up.
Well, I want. Oh my God. So newevilbook.com, that's all one word, new, evil, and then book, and then there's a dot, and then a com. So newevilbook.com, I want to make sure I have that right?
That's correct. Newevilbook.com.
So if someone who is listening to this, who enjoys comics and laughter and great art and sharp writing, that's where they go, newevilbook.com. I want to clarify with you, Brad, because I'm feeling confused on my end.
No. Here's to handle any confusement that you might have.
Confusement? Oh, Lord.
Confusement.
Hold on. I got to write that down.
I'm not shackled by proprietary English. If I don't have the word, I'll make it up.
Confusement. Oh, my God. Brad Geiger, former George W. Bush speechwriter. Confusement. Oh.
Mission accomplished. You can go to newevilbook.com and get all kinds. In fact, at 12, we crossed over the goal at 10,000. At 12,000, it'll be a upgrade for everybody who wants it to a hardcover version of the book. So really excited about that.
And I will throw this out there as someone who is moving. First person to help Brad cross over that stretch goal, I will throw in a rusty old hoe from the top of my shed.
Hey, time to write an update.
You get Dave's rusty old hoe. There we go.
Well, listen, Dave, we've got a bunch of questions from our $5 level Patreon backers, and this is a good time since we're not doing an interview with somebody. Let's see if we can get some of these knocked off the list for these people. What do you think?
Absolutely. And so just to remind everybody, the Patreon questions come in as a thank you for everyone who supports the show because you make it possible on Patreon. At the $5 level, you can submit written questions. And at the $10 level, in a way that I really love, we can get audio questions and hear your actual voice with the tonalities and the tones and the moods. So if you're not yet a Patreon backer, jump on over to patreon.com/Comic Lab and submit your questions. So Bradley, what is our first question for today?
This guy wrote kind of a long question, but I want to read it all because I think there's some nuance here. All right.
All right.
So here's the question. How do I get myself to let go and finish a script as best I can and then spend a huge amount of time drawing something I'm not entirely happy with? I'm a high school art teacher, drawing and painting. Been doing that for 15 years now. As awesome as my job is, I can't seem to let go of the fact that I spent the last 25 years noodling around in sketchbooks, notebooks, and laptops, and that I can never get to the meat of, let alone finish a project. Sometimes I'll wind up drawing a few pages, but most of the disasters happen in the scripting stage. I'll start and get all excited, and then when it's not too long before the story will spin into something bigger than I can handle. Or I'll start convincing myself that it is shit and not worth drawing. It's weird that this far into a professional career and having influenced and connected with several thousand young people, I consider myself a bit of a failure. Part of me wants to give up, but I can't seem to. I've thought about working with a writer, but I don't think that that's the route I want to take. I've heard and tried the whole give yourself a deadline approach, but I know that that's an artificial pressure and it never works for me. The question is, how do I get myself to let go and finish a script and then draw it? And Dave Kellett, there's a lot of nuance in there that I wanted to make sure that you caught. What's your thoughts on this?
Wow, first of all, I got to tell you, thank you for reading that whole question because there's a lot to unpack, but it's a really good. I feel like we're circling back on the existentialism of your early,
We kind of are.
So we asked like, hey, how's your high school art teaching going? Oh, here we go, burr. But so I sympathize a lot with this question and I want to unpack a lot of this and there's actually 4 or 5 different angles to come at this one. The first one is his direct question, which is, let go. How do I let go and finish a script if I have any intimation that I am drawing what I don't passionately love, right? Mm-hmm. That's the main question. But behind that question is a whole 25 years worth of unpacking of what missteps, what paths went wrong for you that you're not able to capitalize on your clear passion for comics. Where do I start? I guess we'll start with the simpler one, which is your direct question. How do you let go, finish a script, and feel like you can give yourself permission to draw what you don't like? Well, so here is, I feel like you are stuck in the first gear of starting a locomotive. And for anybody that's looked at a locomotive engine, that first gear is so immensely slow because it has to get thousands of tons moving, right? And it's almost the hardest gear of a train to get moving. But then once it gets going, it shifts up and it starts going faster and faster and faster because you have momentum going for you and the train can move faster. But the problem is for any cartooning project and for any cartooning career, that first gear is the hardest. And so every question feels like it's weighted to the 10th degree because like, what if I make a bad choice and that first page is terrible? And then I'm stuck with that first page for hundreds of pages. What if I have the wrong theme? Or what if this character shouldn't be in this project? Or what if I make a joke in the first one that undercuts the rest of the story? You know, all those questions that can pop up at the beginning of a project that make you stop from even starting, right? Mm-hmm. That's what he's facing right now. And so that's why I think this first question is so hard for him because I'm on page 400, say, of Drive now, something like that. I don't know. And I do feel the weight of like, oh God, what if I'm making a bad mistake with this page? It happens with every page, right? Yeah. Or not every page, but a lot of them. But nothing matched the weight of, oh God, I hope I'm starting with the right page for Drive. That was really hard. And to this day, I'm still not sure that I started Drive the right way. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is I started. Right. And that is the hardest leap to make, but you have to make that. You have to just start. If you wait for the perfect conditions of life or your career or your cartooning, it will never happen. And that's self-evident by the 25 years that you're looking back on now. The truth is you have to just put down a page, and you have to, it's almost like an AA meeting. You have to take it one day at a time. Put down that first page. That's done. Don't go back to it. Put down the second page. That's done. Don't go back to it. Put down the third page. That's done. One day at a time. You just keep producing page and page and page, or comic and comic and comic. And don't allow yourself to redraw or rewrite or go back. You got to go far. It's kind of like a diet. They always say it takes 30 days to start a new habit. Give yourself a goal of like, this month, I'm going to produce one a week. This month, I'm going to produce one a day. Whatever, I don't know what format or size you're working at. But the truth is, you just have to stop. Or start, not stop. And then my other thought is, clearly your own internal accountability is not working for you. So you have to give yourself public accountability. When you draw it, you have to post it. And you have to post it by sharing it with your students or with your family or with your friends, whatever level you're willing to share it with, but you have to make it public. Because shame has to start entering the equation, and guilt. You have to, your own internal editor and prodding has clearly not worked. So you have to include the public and your friends and your network in prodding you. And that's my first two thoughts. I went too long there, Brad, but what are your thoughts on this question?
I don't think you went too long, but I'm going to say I'm going to take that and I'm going to go maybe a little bit further on it. And I'm going to trust you to be my guide on this, because I have a feeling, I don't know whether I'm being completely fair, but when I read this, I had one thought and one thought only. And I just want to take a second and say to our question asker, I say this with love in my heart for you. And I say this in such a way that I want you to understand it's not a put down or a judgment, but you're not a cartoonist. If you were a cartoonist, you would have done something in 25 years. You're somebody who thinks that they should be a cartoonist. You're somebody who thinks that because you have a love of comics and an ability to draw, that this is a thing that you should do. And it's clearly not a good fit for you. And I think that the angst that you're feeling is out of feeling that you should be doing this thing that just isn't there for you. So I'm going to give you dispensation. I'm going to tell you it's okay to not do this thing and to find other ways to apply your art and your ability to do this. And by the way, if your role is that you should be an art teacher and guide other people, then that's noble and good and valuable. And you should never think that that is second to anything. But if you have started a number of projects and have never been able to finish them, then your own self is telling you something. And that is that this just isn't a good fit for you. So do something else. Do something that's maybe straight up illustration. Do something that maybe is painting, or any of the other ways that you can express your skills as a visual artist. Comics just isn't for you.
Wow. I respect that, because that's such a different answer than I would have given. And it's good to have, I guess, a good cop, bad cop on this.
Well, I'm asking you, am I too rough on him? Because I don't want to sound like that's right. In fact, in my mind, it's just the opposite. It's like you're torturing yourself. Stop it. Do something else. You don't have to be this thing. You can love comics and read them and go out and paint.
Yes. So first thing, I want to echo Brad's thought that because you use the word failure, and by your own words, you have taught and influenced and touched thousands of lives as a teacher. And that is an immeasurable value to so many tens of thousands of lives of those people that have rippled out. You have been like a stone dropped into a placid lake, and you have rippled out into tens of thousands of lives, your teaching and your work. So that can't be said enough in this conversation. And I want to echo Brad on that, is that your path that you have chosen, in some respects, maybe your gut knew all along that that was the best path for you, and you have succeeded in influencing and touching and teaching thousands of lives, right? Yeah. So let's put that out there first, especially in a culture that undervalues teaching by salary. I mean, we should be paying teachers much closer to 100,000 versus the 30 to 50 that they get paid in a lot of states.
Absolutely.
I also want to say, kind of in a version of what Brad would say, is that it's that Bob Dylan quote of, you got to get busy living or get busy dying. And If in your heart you want to be a cartoonist, you only get one life, and it's been 25 years, and now is a great time to say what I have done in the past has not worked for me.
Yeah.
So all the things that you limited yourself with by saying, I don't know if I could work for a writer, maybe it's time to work with a writer. I don't know if I can publicly post, maybe it's time to publicly post. I don't know if I can draw a page that I'm not 100% on. Maybe it's time to draw a page that you're not 100% on so that you can get to page 50, which is a page that you're going to love. You know what I mean? You have to start fighting your own 25 years of inclinations on this because they didn't work for you. And I say that as someone for whom every time I have to change weight, I have to say to myself, all right, clearly my eating patterns and dieting patterns and my workout patterns aren't working. I need to give myself 30 days of no carbs or 30 days of going to the gym every day. And then I'm going to reassess on how it's going. And guess what? 30 days later, I lost 15 pounds. Well, that's shit. Maybe I shouldn't have been eating In-N-Out all the time. All right. And going to the gym. And I say that as someone who has been eating his feelings for the past 3 months of this move. So you're about to start getting a healthier friend in your life, Brad. I'm going to be having a lot of salad and kale in the near future because I've been eating a lot of chocolate. I got to tell you, you know what's death for me, Brad? Is the little Cadbury little chocolate Easter eggs, the little ones.
Yeah, and this is a bad time of year for that.
Oh my God, because they all went on sale, Brad.
Yeah,
they all went on sale.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Oh my God, my local supermarket had a 2-pound bag of mini eggs, and I was like, I can't fight this fight right now. So anyway, so to finish up, because this triggers a lot of feelings in me. This question, and it's I want to sit down and have a beer with this person and talk about it at longer length, but. Because I have a lot of competing thoughts. You have done wonderful with your life as being an art teacher. That's amazing. I wish I could teach right now in my timeline. I think it would be so lovely to teach. Mm-hmm. And Brad, I know Brad for a fact has loved and would love to keep doing it as well. Yeah. It's a joy-filled process with the rare times I do get to teach. But there clearly is a part of your soul that wants to be a cartoonist. So I want to say this as a friend. You have to do it. You have to just start. You cannot put it off. I think another thing that I didn't say at first is that a part of your mind clearly wants perfection at first. And you know, as a teacher, that it takes hundreds, if not thousands of hours of failing before you really start succeeding.
Well, and not only that, but what's the first thing they teach you in art school or in any art class? Perfect is the enemy of done. Wouldn't you rather look back over 25 years over 5 imperfect projects instead of look back and see 0 of anything? I'd rather see 25 imperfect projects that each has a flaw or an imperfection, because each one of those imperfect projects leads you to one that's a little bit closer to being perfect.
That's a great way. Oh, Brad, I really like that. That's a great point. Yes. Better. It's a version of better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Like at least you produced 25 or 5 or even 1 imperfect comic project.
Yeah.
So I have an idea, and Brad, you tell me what is the good thought. Give yourself a limited time frame and a limited page count. You're going to produce a 10-page story. That's what you're going to produce, a 10-page story, yep. And you're going to do it in 2 months. Yep. So take that as your goal. I'm going to produce a 10-page story for my students, make it limited like that. And then you're going to start in a semester and you're going to say, hey guys, you know what? It's good for you to see that a teacher can try to stretch as well. So over this, every week of this semester, I'm going to show you 1 new comic page that I'm doing. And at the end, we're going to see my 10-page comic.
Teacher has homework.
Right. And you're going to say, because kids, it's not just students that need to learn. It's a learning process throughout life, and art is a journey. And I'm going to take you a little bit on mine while we go through yours as well.
Dave, you and I had exactly the same thought. Yours is a little bit different than mine, and I like yours better. So I'm not going to overwrite it. But I would even underline something that you just said, and that is, tell your students that this is what you're doing. Why? Because those little shits will hold you accountable. They will hold it over you. Hey, teacher, when you come in, where's your homework? And you know what? You do not want to have to put up with that. That's going to make you get that page done.
Oh yeah, that bullshit. Well, that'll get old real quick. Yeah, exactly.
Better than a deadline facing down that little snot-nosed Brad who's going to hold it over you. I make yourself vulnerable to that. Say, hey, this is what I'm doing, and then they'll hold you accountable.
What's great about this is that seeing the window to Brad's soul of like, so part A is The teacher's role is valuable. It's amazing. It's a gift to society. Part B on Brad's window, again, that thin saran wrap. Part B of Brad's personality is those little snotty nose shits, those little sons of bitches. Oh, I hate them. I hate them. Those little. Oh, they're a little piece of work. Those kids. Oh, I hate them. So we start off with Michigan Brad, and then we get Philly Brad at the end. That was amazing.
Yeah, I am having kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde day over here, aren't I?
No, but it's delightful. There's no middle ground. It's either you're giving the world a warm, giggly, huggy embrace, or else you're kicking them in the ass. That's great. I love it. All right. Well, I think I want to say, though, I would love to hear you check back in with us next semester if you do this, if you do it in the fall, or even now, just start this semester. Let's see, how many more months do we have till summer? Well, maybe there's not enough time, but do a 5-pager if you can't do a 10-pager. Just do a short story, in something short that is maybe an autobio. I don't know, something that your students will appreciate.
Well, and if you don't have time before the end of the semester, then what I was going to suggest is, because I took the hard line. I said, listen, face the possibility that maybe you're just not a cartoonist in your heart.
That's Philly, Brad.
You've got summer vacation coming up. Give yourself one last chance. In other words, instead of saying, well, Brad's right, I'm going to kick the can and this isn't for me, blah, blah. Give yourself the summer. And if by the end of the summer you haven't produced something, then say, you know what, maybe he was right. I'm going to go paint, or I'm going to apply myself to another pursuit, and that's what I was going to say. So if you don't have time for the semester, make this a summer project.
So I want to go even farther than Brad, because I feel like even that version is a bit pessimistic in the sense that Brad said, give yourself one more chance. I want to tell you as a friend, give yourself many more chances. It's not a wasted pursuit to want to be a cartoonist. And if it takes you until your 70s, so be it.
But listen to all the angst that he's got. He's miserable with himself he's looks over 25 years of nothing, and he's written us one of the longest letters we've ever gotten. All right, and you can hear the disappointment. In fact, I'm reading right here. I consider myself a bit of a failure. Why do that to yourself if it's not there? Don't do that to yourself. Do something else that gives you renewed sense of purpose.
Oh, Brad, because we love what we hate and we hate what we love. I don't know. What do you want from me? We can't choose who we love in this life, Brad. Sometimes it's hard. This is going
to be another talk about Jake, isn't it?
The heart wants what it wants, yes. Brad.
Well, listen, before I interrupted with you, because I want to wrap this up and get a couple more questions out, but finish your thought before I so rudely interrupted you.
No, I love that Michigan Brad reinserted himself. That's right. Great. Okay, so I just basically I wanted to say I don't know why I want to put it in the context of Colonel Sanders, but I always like that he succeeded late in life, and I find stories like that valuable because we always hear about the unicorn artist or pianist or writer that sold their first novel at 25 and look at them go, biggity boom. But we really, as a society, we celebrate youth and we don't talk enough about the fact that sometimes the steps to get to a modicum of success takes decades. Mm-hmm. And so I would say keep at it. Like if you enjoy cartooning, but you also are desperate to find a way to make it work, keep plugging away at it. It may finally click for you in your 70s. Another one to look at is Kirby. When did Kirby's career really take off? Like he first drew the Fantastic Four in like his 50s, right?
Well, yeah, that's the one that gets passed around our circles an awful lot, is that he produced the first Fantastic Four comic in his 40s. But you've got to remember, he was working in comics for a long time before the Fantastic Four. But that is something he had never really. He didn't become Jack Kirby until the Fantastic Four, I guess you could kind of argue. But that's when he hit his apex and really hit his stride. But yeah, he was 40 when that happened.
Well, thank you for undercutting my optimism. All right, so Philly Brad reasserted himself.
Yeah,
That's good. All
he's not completely gone.
right. Well, Dave, I guess that's true that Jack Kirby created Fantastic Four in his 40s, but fuck you. That's what I say to that.
But listen, even Jack Kirby notwithstanding, your central point remains. There's a lot of people who didn't. J.K. Rowling's, right, is another one. Was certainly not a child prodigy. There's lots of people that didn't hit their stride until later in life, and that's okay too.
Yeah, I think to Brad's point, both J.K. Rowling's and J.K. Rowling did well in succeeding later in life. So oh, Philly Dave came out. Wow.
Oh God!
I like that you made her J.K. Rowling's, like there's a plural. Yeah, you don't like that writer with that Harry Potter's, J.K. Rowling.
That's J.K. Rowling's. I think she's the one that made all those leather baseball mitts. The Rowlings.
Wow, what a flashback to my youth. Rowling's baseball
yeah,
gloves.
you got that smell all of a
go-
sudden, didn't you?
Oh, I did, and that weird oil that you would rub into your glove. What a weird youth. All right. Anyway, so jump into the next question, Bradley J.
So now that we've destroyed that dream, let's see what else we can do.
No, I hope we didn't.
I hope we didn't either. My big thing is I don't want him to be. I don't want him to feel like a failure. There's all kinds of other ways for him to not be a failure. Anyway, let's see if we can pick up the optimism here. Question: what criteria do you think should be met before launching a Patreon? What actionable steps can a webcomic artist take to ensure success? And so here's what I was thinking, maybe kind of a list of do's and don'ts for somebody thinking about their first Patreon. What do you think, Dave?
I think that's great and really helpful for a podcast that claims to help people in their cartooning. Yes. That got a bigger laugh than I anticipated there. All right.
So here's one I'll start out with, and it's a biggie. And if you get your head around this, it's going to ensure that you're heading in the right direction. Do build your audience first. In other words,
yes.
Patreon is not a place to go to get discovered. Patreon is not a place that people are going to find your work and all of a sudden start backing you. Patreon, rather, is a place that you take the audience that you've built so that you can monetize that behavior. It's something that you cannot go into Patreon with the idea of it being like an ATM that you can go and plug it in, and then all of a sudden people out of nowhere are going to start pledging money to your campaign. Instead, this is the place that you go once you've done all the hard work of community building and readership cultivation. Once you've been doing this for a little while, frankly, then that's where you go to monetize them. So there's step number one. What do you think, Dave? You got a do or a don't?
Yeah, I just had the most amazing thing. I couldn't find the mute for my mic, and I had to sneeze, and I had the most held back sneeze I've ever had in my life, and it kind of blew out my sinuses.
Don't do that. You can blow your eardrums out doing that.
I know. You know where you kind of do the
oh, I know.
like that, and I felt it on my cerebellum. That was not what you want. Oh boy, ooh, Nelly. So Patreon, my second step after Brad's first step is let the sneeze happen. Because try to hold it back.
I could have edited these out, crying out loud.
But not at this point. Now I've talked about it. So no, second step. So absolutely. In some respects, you want to think of Patreon. This is not a perfect example. In fact, I already think of a drawback. But think of Patreon like a convention where you're selling to fans that you already have gotten elsewhere.
Right.
And maybe that's not the best comparison because you're also getting new fans at a convention. Also, because even Patreon wants you to own and control your own readership. I don't think, and we say, here we are sitting here saying this as two podcasters where it only lives on Patreon for the most part. We should have a Comic Lab site, I suppose, but neither one of us have the extra time at the moment. But anyway, you want to own and control your own site. That's step one. Step two, I would say, is become a patron of other cartoonists first.
Become a patron of other campaigns. I like that.
You're going to want to see the tones, the moods, the ways that other cartoonists pitch and use Patreon, right? And that'll be helpful to you. It's a $10 a month well spent before you start yours. You can always stop it, but it's good to see for a month or two how other people do it. And then step one is just start and keep it very simple at first.
Hmm.
You can just have a basic. I would start at the $2 level, not at the $1 level. I think two is the new one. It's like yellow is the new black, whatever they say.
Yeah.
Two is the new one. I think start a Patreon with a $2 level, because if people will give $1, they'll give $2. And across 50, 100, 150 people, 200 people, an extra dollar from each one of them makes a big difference in your Patreon. So start with two, start simple, and know that you will change, adapt, grow, and modify that Patreon as you go. It's not like a Kickstarter where once it launches, you can't modify the levels.
Right.
A Patreon is infinitely modifiable, infinitely changeable as you go forward, because it's long term. And then Brad, I think maybe can answer this part even better. Never launch with a physical product. Do you want to jump on that one, Brad?
That's a big don't. Don't have physical rewards because the shipping's going to kill you. You can experiment with physical rewards at higher levels. Right now, the lowest I send a physical reward out is basically $60. You've got to do three $20 rewards in a row. And by the way, I would also I would not suggest doing that until you're much, much further along, where you're putting out rewards for multiple pledges. I would say, especially to start out, 1 month of Patreon backing equals one reward. If you want to work them into the habit of supporting you monthly, you better reward them monthly. And here's another don't. Don't confuse Kickstarter rewards with Patreon rewards. In other words, I see a lot of people doing this where they say, if you're my Patreon backer, when I kickstart my new book, you'll get a free copy of that book. That's completely wrong. And I'll tell you why. Because Kickstarter backers and Patreon backers are your, what we call the 1,000 or the 10,000 true fans. These are the people that want you to succeed. They do not begrudge you a Kickstarter if they're a Patreon backer. And those people that back you on Kickstarter do not begrudge you a Patreon. In fact, what you should be doing, and it's something we've talked about on this show before, is you should be cross-promoting that. You should be doing as much as you can to make the most out of both. And I stole this from Dave on my Kickstarter that I'm running right now. When we did the Kickstarter, I launched it, did not announce it to anybody but my Patreon backers. And I had some early bird reward levels set up there that you didn't have to pay for shipping. And I said, listen, you guys, I said this on Patreon, 24 hours, and then I'm making the formal announcement. Until then, you guys have free shots at all those early bird rewards. The end result, I started my Kickstarter at the end of 24 hours with $2,000. Immediately got on the radar for Kickstarter's algorithm, so they started promoting me further within their own systems and had a very nice opening week on Kickstarter. In fact, I hit my goal at the halfway mark. Why? Because I don't confuse Patreon rewards with Kickstarter rewards. Both of those groups want me to succeed. And the Kickstarter backers, they hear all about my Patreon. If they want more content, they know where to find it on Patreon. And the Patreon backers know how to support me on Kickstarter. Don't confuse the two.
Those are all great. And I think I would, additional to shipping or physical rewards, I want to warn you off from doing extra work. And Brad and I have a slightly different version of this, so it's good to talk it out. Brad is of the opinion that a lot of exclusives help drive a Patreon audience. And I think that there is a lot of truth to that. But I like to set up my Patreon so that I'm not giving myself extra work. And there's a lot of ways that, and Brad can say it better, that he can justify those extras and exclusives because he will use them. He will print with them. He will bring them into book form. He'll sell them 2 or 3 times in different ways to people. But Patreon people just get the first crack at it. My opinion is don't give yourself goals like, hey, if we get to 50 Patreon backers, everybody gets a free digital caricature of themselves. Or
yeah, I would avoid that. Yeah.
Every week that you're a Patreon backer, I'm going to draw a whole extra landscape painting for everybody. And you're like, you want to remember that the Patreon exists to support the work. The Patreon doesn't exist to give you extra work. And so there are semantics in terms of how Brad and I would define extra work in terms of exclusives. But I think in general, we would both agree that you don't want to produce extra wasted work. Like if it's going to be stuff that's going to go into a book or going to eventually be on your other site or eventually, or is a real genuine driver to an audience, that's okay. But don't give yourself busy work just to satisfy a sense that your work, your existing work, is not enough to have become a patron of. That's a form of imposter syndrome, and I want you to avoid
I agree 100%, because what you're actually saying has nothing really to do with exclusives. So much as it has to do with overextending yourself. In other words, let me put a different spin on that and see if you agree with it. Know what you can deliver consistently. If you can deliver a public web comic as well as a exclusive comic that you update on a certain basis, and if you can do that consistently, then do that thing. But like Dave says, if you're offering people a caricature of them and something that you're clearly, it's not going to scale for you. In other words, once you get 10, 20, 30 backers, you're never going to be able to keep up. Well, that is something you cannot deliver consistently. So you can't do that. It really boils down to know what you can deliver consistently.
Yes, yeah, that's a better way to say it. Yeah, in Brad's terms, you don't want to give yourself extra confusement. You want to I think what a jerk. Why did I bring that back up?
That's jerk. That's called a callback. That's fair game.
I just feel like if I were my hero J.K. Rowling, I would not have said that. I think I would not have brought that back up. Yeah, so I think Brad is right. You just want to you never want to overpromise, and you never want to generate busy work for yourself if it's busy work that you can't accomplish. For example, I know that like Lar D'Souza is an amazing quick sketch artist, and frankly, an amazingly fast artist and talented artist anyway. So I know that very often on Twitter and on his social media forums, he shares a lot of work that, frankly, for me would take me a good chunk of the day to produce. And yet I can tell that he's fast at it. So if you're fast at it, we'll go with God, have fun, go to town on it. But if it's something that's producing a lot of time wastage for you, then don't overpromise that. And you know your own limits, so gauge your Patreon rewards thusly. But in general, Brad is right. You want to build your audience elsewhere. You do want to just start, or you want to follow a couple other cartoonists first to test the waters on how they do it. You want to start, and you want to start simply, and then you don't want to overpromise with physical rewards or extra time wastage. Anything else that we should add on this to capstone this question?
I've only got one last one that I want to throw out there, and it's a real simple concept. Be ready to engage. And this goes back to that conversation we had before about you got to hear a call to action 7 times. You're going to be talking about your Patreon campaign every day, well, if not every day, certainly every week. You're going to be talking about this a lot. You're going to get tired of talking about it. But this is an ongoing campaign. If you've ever done a Kickstarter, think about how relieved you are when you get to the 30th day and you're like, oh my God, thank goodness I don't have to promote this anymore. I can talk about something else. We've all had that feeling. Patreon is ongoing. You're going to be talking about this and finding creative, new, interesting ways of presenting that content. And if that's exclusive content, finding creative ways of presenting that content and yet keeping it exclusive. You're going to be doing that for an ongoing basis. So buckle in. Get ready. This is this, as much as a Kickstarter campaign is draining over 30 days, you're going to be doing this for an ongoing basis. And just know that up front so you're not surprised by it. In fact, I just had to kind of remind myself of that recently because I had a couple of months where I really had flat growth or almost plateaued in Patreon. And I kind of looked back and it's like, okay, is this kind of where my natural setting is, or am I doing something wrong? And I went back and looked on my social media, and obviously enough, I got talking about Kickstarter and wasn't talking as much about Patreon. And when I wasn't promoting as much, guess what? I wasn't growing as much. So I had to have a little talk with myself about this very same thing. Be ready to engage on an ongoing basis. You're not being repetitive because remember, due to the algorithms and so forth, that any one member of your followers is not getting every message you're sending out. So feel free to be a little bit repetitive and do that engaging part of Patreon campaigning.
Absolutely. I mean, if I can get high-minded for a second and quote Death of a Salesman, like Linda was saying about Willy Loman, attention must be paid. So you have to be prepared with your Patreon campaign to give it attention. And so, for example, I currently have a goal to grow my Patreon 10% by San Diego Comic-Con. And the reason is I kind of let it go fallow for about 6 to 12 months, not in terms of engagement, not in terms of managing existing patrons, but in terms of outreach. So the natural atrophy that happens with any audience where people like either run out of funds or their life situation changed, so they have to stop being a patron, all of which is well and good and natural and normal. I wasn't replenishing my new patrons because I wasn't out pushing it for the last 6 to 12 months. So it's a version of what Brad was saying there, is that attention must be paid. You have to have your outreach on the sites, on your different platforms, for new patrons to constantly be introducing them to, hey, this Patreon thing exists. Here's why it exists, and here's why you might want to join. Because first of all, you have to explain that Patreon exists, because you and I and every other artist in the world knows Patreon and Kickstarter. I guarantee you, there's a huge chunk of your audience that's like, Patreon what? Patreon. I have literally never heard of this website. What are you talking about? And so you still have to introduce Patreon to a big swath of your audience constantly. Then you have to tell them why it's important. And then you have to make it clear to them why it's important for them to join. So right now I am on a push, and it's already paying off, that you have to be drawing attention to your Patreon. So it's not a fixed battle where once you got that first 1,000 patrons, you're done. You're fixed for life. No, what's going to happen is every 6 months, you're going to lose 50 of those. And if you look again, suddenly you're like, oh, now I'm at 750 patrons. Okay, time to refocus my efforts on building that back up again. So unlike a Kickstarter where every battle you win is a already fixed and done battle, Patreon is a constant churn and a constant fight. I don't want to describe it as a fight, but a constant...
That's why I like to use the word campaign, because it's really what people kind of bristle on webcomics.com when I first started talking about Patreon campaigns, because you could get your mind around Kickstarter being a campaign, but Patreon felt different. And I kind of insisted, nope, this is a campaign. It's just an ongoing one.
Yeah, I really feel, as a friend, Brad, we should circle back around on the fact that I quoted Death of a Salesman and got nothing from you on that. I was really hoping you'd be like, wow, Death of a Salesman, what a great reference.
I was waiting for a joke there. You floored me. I was waiting. It sounded like a joke setup, and then you brought forth this really meaningful phrase from the play, and I was just...
This goes back to, Brad, all I want in life is your love. I just need your affirmation. I just need to hear you say once a podcast, Dave, you did a great job there. Good job, champ.
Dave, attention must be paid.
I thought you know what I thought you were going to say? Dave, I'm a big Squirrel Girl fan.
Oh, the ultra callback. That's fantastic.
The multi-episode callback. Go ahead.
Before I forget, I want to put a button on your ending just to extend it a little bit, because it's something I've been meaning to bring up, and it's so important. You mentioned promotion on your site, and that's something that's really crucial. So we just gone through this period of time in webcomics that a lot of us have taken our ads off of the site that we run, our own personal websites, because advertisers don't value that space anymore, or more likely ad blockers have devalued that space. But that doesn't mean that space does not have value. If you used to run ads on your site and now you don't, you shouldn't just leave that blank or, kind of design around it. That's house ad space. That's ads that you should be using to promote yourself. And that's still valuable space. So yes, by all means, take down Project Wonderful, take down AdSense if it's not delivering the way you think it should, but don't just leave it blank. Don't design it out. Put in a house ad for your Patreon. Leave a house ad for your Kickstarter in there, or for your new book, or for some pins that you might be producing. What I'm saying is this space still has value. Don't let it go fallow. Use that. And instead of paying ads, use promotion.
That is brilliant. I think that was the perfect button on that one, Brad. Yeah. Good work.
Well, on that note, you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been the ever-delightful Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com, cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com, and also the current Kickstarter, newevilbook.com.
And Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped, and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive at drivecomic.com.
The Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/comiclab.